Okay. I already had Discord open. Jeez. Alright. So, like I was saying, gonna be doing more reading about whatchamacallit, how to raise your self-esteem. So I'm gonna get the YouTube chat pulled up real quick because there were some people typing in it actually. I missed it. Where's this good old baffler? There you are. Okie dokie. So, does it work? Ohio. Yes, it does work. And I will, well, it should work. I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh yeah, it'll work. Alright, there we go. There you go, Pepsi. That's what Pepsi's supposed to mean. It is way too fucking loud though, so I will adjust that. But it says Pedro. Yeah, I know, but like Pepsi. Da da da. It starts with a P, you know. And like I didn't think that would scare me as much as it did in terms of how loud it is, but it did. So I might have to just lower that real quick. Where would I do that? There. Pedro. Wait, not Streamlabs. Dashboard, sound alerts, volume. Crank it down to like, I don't know, 60. Oh, that's a lot better. We also have this one.
It's fucking embarrassing!
Well, penis and pineapple both start with a P, but they're not the same at all. Sure. Oh, and Storm, you wanted to play this one earlier when I was having technical problems, so I'll play it for you now.
Oh, no.
This is from 21 Jump Street.
Oh, shit! Oh, shit!
But yeah. I don't know if I can do... I might be able to... Yeah.
We finally got enough people for a 7-mile spanking machine! Ouch!
Oh no, yes, that is from The Walking Dead. That's Rick. After he finds out what happens to Lori. Spoilers. If you don't know, you know. But yeah, those are all the sound alerts. They should all work. And Ricky14 on YouTube says, hi Ricky, how you doing? And you remember that scene, good. Alright, so, pitter patter. I think I said I was going to go to the bathroom and I never did, or maybe I did and that was just a long time ago and I can't remember. But anyway, what we're doing is we're reading chapter 3 of this book. I'm going to put on my glasses to sell the illusion that I'm an intellectual to all you fine folks. But anywho. Take a sip of water before I really get started. The word I, as in myself. How long is that? 3 minutes or 5 minutes? I can't remember how long that's supposed to be. And that actually might not be a problem because this book is not written in the first person. So, checkmate, Pepsi. Okay. Chapter 3. Dude, you already broke when I was saying. Well, I got. Beef's gotta read it. You know? Anywho. Chapter 3. Living consciously. There are two words that best describe what we can do to raise our self esteem, to generate more self confidence and self respect. They are live consciously. The problem with this statement is that they may be too abstract for some people. It does not self-evidently translate into mental and or physical action. If we wish to grow, we need to know what to do. We need to learn new behaviors. So we must ask, if we practice living more consciously, in what ways would we be acting differently? We need the balance of this book to answer this question fully. But first, let's see why living consciously is the foundation of self-confidence and self-respect. Our minds are the basic means of survival. All our distinctively human accomplishments are the reflections of our ability to think. Successful life depends on the appropriate use of intelligence, appropriate, that is, to the tasks and goals we set for ourselves. And to the challenges we face. This is the core biological fact of our existence. But the appropriate use of our consciousness is not automatic. Rather, it is an act of choice. We are free to strive for the expansion or the contraction of consciousness. Do I have TTS for bits? I do not. I don't think I do. I don't think it's text to speech, so anyway. But the appropriate use of our consciousness is not automatic. Rather, it is an act of choice. We are free to strive for the expansion or the contraction of consciousness. We can seek to know more or see less. We can seek to see more or to see less. We can wish to know or not to know. We can struggle for clarity or for fog. We can live consciously or semi-consciously, or, for the most practical purposes, unconsciously. This is the ultimate meaning of free will. If our lives and well-being depend on the appropriate use of consciousness, then the extent to which we honor sight over blindness is the single most important determinant of our self-confidence and self-respect. We can hardly feel competent in life when wandering around, at work, in our marriages, or in dealing with our children. Excuse me. We can hardly feel competent in our life. I already said that. We can hardly feel confident in our life while wandering around in a self-induced mental fog. If we betray our basic means of survival by attempting to exist unthinkingly, our sense of worthiness suffers accordingly, regardless of other people's approval or disapproval of us. We know our defaults, whether or not anyone else does. Self-esteem is the reputation we acquire within ourselves. With ourselves, not within ourselves. A 1,000 times a day we must choose the level of consciousness at which we will function. 1,000 times a day we must choose between thinking and non-thinking. Gradually, over time, we establish a sense of the kind of person we are, depending on the choices we make, the rationality and integrity we exhibit. That is the reputation of which I speak. The more intelligent we are, the greater is our potential for awareness, but the principle of living consciously remains the same regardless of level of intelligence. To live consciously means to seek to be aware of everything that bears on our actions, purposes, values, and goals, and to behave in accordance with that which we see and know. In any given situation, living consciously means generating a state of mind appropriate to the task at hand. Driving a car, making love, writing a grocery list, studying a balance sheet, meditating, all require somewhat different mind states. Different kinds of mental processes. In matters of mental functioning, context determines appropriateness. In matters of mental functioning, context determines appropriateness. Living consciously means taking responsibility for the awareness appropriate to the action in which we are engaged. This, above all, is the foundation of self-confidence and self-respect. Self-esteem, then, is a function not of what we are born with, but how we use our consciousness, the choices we make concerning awareness, the honesty of our relationship to reality, and the level of our personal integrity. The level of our personal integrity. A person of high intelligence and high self-esteem does not feel more appropriate to life or more worthy of happiness than a person of high self-esteem and modest intelligence. Living consciously implies respect for the facts of reality, the facts of our inner world as well as our outer world, as contrasted with an attitude that amounts to, if I don't choose to see it or acknowledge it, it doesn't exist. Living consciously is living responsibly toward reality. This doesn't mean that we have to like what we see, but it does mean that we recognize that which is and that which is not, and that wishes or fears or denials do not alter facts. To illustrate what I mean by living consciously, I offer the following examples. Living consciously. When John was hired for a new job, he did everything he could to master what was required of him, and kept looking for ways to perform his tasks more efficiently. Beyond that, he sought to understand the wider context in which his work took place, so that he would be qualified to move up and not be stuck indefinitely on the level where he started. His basic desire was to learn, and thereby to keep growing in confidence, productiveness, and competence. Wait, do you have the Twitch emote extension thingy? Maybe? I have, like, a personal emo for myself. Like, what do I see here? Kek W. That's all I see. Just you saying Kek W. So, like, I don't think I have that extension. The only extensions I have are closed captions and sound alerts. Although I think you can make another one as, like, an overlay or something. But anywho. Living unconsciously. When Jim was hired for a job with the same firm, he imagined that if he memorized the routine of the tasks assigned to him and didn't attract negative attention, he might hope for security. Challenges had no appeal for him, since they entailed risk and required thought. He operated at the minimal level of awareness necessary to repeat the motions he had been taught, contributing nothing of his own. His gaze rarely strayed from his work station, except for purposes of socializing or daydreaming. He felt no curiosity about his job in the wider sense. Why should he? He felt the job was there. He kept a small clock in front of him so that he would know precisely when it was 5 o'clock, time to go home. When he was confronted by his supervisor with mistakes he had made, he typically alibied and inwardly seethed. But when John was promoted, and Jim was not, Jim felt bewildered and resentful. Which of these two behavior patterns more resembles yours, and what is the impact of this behavior on your self-esteem? Because there's this extension that allows you to make custom emotes easier, and I think they're free for all, some or not. I would like to do that, because I think the only emote I have is one that Twitch gave me. But anywho. Living consciously. A happily married woman named Serena once said to me, "An hour after I met the man I married, I could have given you a lecture on the ways he'd be difficult to live with. I think he's the most exciting man I've ever known, but I've never kidded myself about the fact that he's also one of the most self-absorbed. Often, he's like an absent-minded professor. He spends a great deal of time in a private world of his own. I had to know that going in, or else I would have been very upset later. He never made any pretenses about the kind of man he was. I can't understand people who profess to be hurt or shocked at the way their mates turn out. It's so obvious what people are if you just pay attention. I've never been happier in my whole life than I am right now in this marriage, but not because I tell myself my husband is perfect or without fault. You know, I think that's why I feel so appreciative of his strength and virtues. I'm willing to see everything." Living unconsciously. A woman named Carol, who came for psychotherapy at our first session, said, "I have the most awful bad luck with men. I mean, how many women can say that their last 3 lovers all beat them? I don't know why these things happen. Why me, God, why me? No, I can't say I take the trouble to get to know a man before. Part of the excitement is being in a daze, isn't it? It's always a big shock. I can't believe it's happening. When they start swinging, I suppose I kind of knew, in a way, they were going to be trouble. There were signs. But I wanted things to be good. I wanted each one to be Mr. Right. So even if I heard how they treated other women, I told myself, he'll be different with me. I wonder if the other women told themselves that too. Mother used to say, look before you leap. But can you have fun that way? I like to just close my eyes and fall, come what may. That's my philosophy. If only I'd meet a better type of man. Granted, these two types of women represent the extremes of opposite attitudes, but in your personal relationships, which attitude is closer to your own? Living consciously. When Roger was growing up, he saw and heard many things he could not understand. He heard his mother lecture him on the virtue of honesty, and then, on many occasions, heard her lie to the neighbors. He saw his father look at his mother with hatred, a moment after saying to her, yes, dear, you're right, I apologize. He saw that most adults almost never told the truth about their feelings, that they usually looked unhappy and defeated, but that it did not prevent them from delivering sermons on how to live a successful life. They seemed to care much more about what other people thought than about what was right. He was dismayed, but at times frightened by what he saw, but he kept on looking, kept on trying to understand. He knew he did not want to be like the grown-ups around him. Alright, Pepsi, I'll see you later. He knew he did not want to be like the grown-ups around him. He often felt lonely for someone he could truly admire, but he did not pretend that he admired the people he knew. He was impatient to grow up. So that he could go out and find a better path than that offered by the adults he saw. In the meantime, he told himself, nothing was more important than to protect the clarity of his own sight, and not to surrender to hopelessness. Bruised, battered, alienated from those around him, he hung on, he persevered, and grew up to discover friends he could like and admire, and possibilities for the kind of life he had dreamed of as a child, when he didn't even know the words to name it. As an adult, he found the words and the reality. I'm going to charge my headphones real quick, because I'm not using them. They're about to die. Gotcha, buddy. Living unconsciously, Milton lived in a world very much like Roger's, but very early in life he drew a different conclusion. Dimly and wordlessly, he decided, seeing too much is dangerous. He wanted to belong. He wanted to be loved. And that felt more important than anything else. So, he pretended not to notice when grown-ups were lying or being hypocritical or cruel, and he learned to emulate their behavior. A day came when it felt as natural as breathing. By the time he was a teenager, he wondered what had happened to the excitement he had felt as a little boy, but he quickly pushed such thoughts from his mind. When he was 20 years old, his father came to him one day. Do you think life is about being happy? By now Milton was so numb, he knew no answer was required. His father was merely stating the obvious. Having a drink with his friends when he was 30, Milton said, I'll tell you the secret of life. Go through the motions and don't think. Then you don't feel the pain. Everyone felt that Milton was a regular fellow, except his bewildered children, who saw a void staring at them from his eyes. But to adults, he appeared entirely normal, which is what Milton had always wanted, and would sell his soul for. And he did. Can you relate the psychology of either of these men to yourself? if you can, what was illuminated. Living consciously. Karen was a research scientist in the field of biochemistry. She had written several highly regarded papers in which she developed a theory that was gaining a great many adherents among her colleagues. Then, in an obscure journal published in Australia, she read some of the experimental findings that, if verified, completely invalidated her theory. She duplicated the experiments and found that her theory was indeed disconfirmed, and published a paper announcing this. When a more cynical associate asked her why she would choose to set back her own career on the basis of a lead from a journal no one had ever heard of, she looked at him uncomprehendingly, which only infuriated her colleague. "I'm interested in what is true," she said. "What is truth?" shrugged her colleague. Living unconsciously. In this case, it would be to share the mentality of the colleague in the story above regardless of one's own profession. Of these two conflicting attitudes toward truth, which one more resembles your own, and how consistent are you, and how is your sense of yourself affected? Living consciously. In the midst of a heated argument with his wife, Jerry stopped suddenly and said, "Wait a minute, I think I'm being defensive and not really hearing you. Could we back up a few steps and try again? Now let me see if I understand what you're saying." Living unconsciously. For years, Philip's wife has tried to tell him she was unhappy in their marriage. His typical response was to become uncontrollably sleepy. When she attempted to have a discussion with him early in the day, in the hope that he would be more awake, he snapped. "Why do you always start these impossible subjects when you know I'm getting ready to go to work?" When his wife asked for an alternative time that would be more suitable, he responded, "Now you're trying to trap me. I can't stand pressure." When his wife told him that unless they learned to communicate, she was unprepared to spend her life with him, he yelled, "Do you think other wives are any happier?" and stormed out of the house. When after such years of non-confrontations he came home one day to find her gone, and a note saying that she couldn't take it anymore, he cried to an empty house. "What's the matter? How could this have happened? How could she just leave me without giving me a chance?" Do you identify with one of these patterns of behavior more than the other? Can you find aspects of yourself in these two stories? And do you like or dislike what you see? Living consciously. Whenever Kay decided on a new goal, she immediately asked herself what would be required to attain it. When she wanted to start her own business, she prepared an elaborate plan of action, including a series of detailed sub-strategies that allowed her to move step by step toward her desired end. And then she proceeded to act. She did not wait passively for someone to provide her with the fulfillment of her dreams. When something went wrong, her typical response was, "What did I overlook?" When she encountered obstacles, she thought not in terms of blame, but in terms of solutions. She took responsibility for being the cause of the effects she wanted. When she succeeded, she was not astonished. Mary was unhappy working in a dress shop and dreamed of having a shop of her own. Welcome back, Bunny. But when friends asked her why and how she thought she could make a go of it, she answered, "But wouldn't it be wonderful?" When her boss reproached her for daydreaming on the job and being careless and inattentive with customers, she told herself, "It's hard to concentrate on unimportant things when I'm thinking about my own ambitions." When a friend suggested that it would be helpful if she showed more initiative at her job, she answered, "Why should I kill myself working for somebody else?" On hearing from her employer that her services were no longer required, she felt shocked and betrayed. She wondered why some people seemed to realize their dreams while she could not, and she thought, maybe I'm not unscrupulous enough to succeed in business. She was vaguely aware of the hatred growing in her heart, but she called it an indignation at the injustice of the system. If you knew two such women, which would you have more in common with, and which more reminds you of yourself? And can you see the implications for your self-confidence and self-respect? Living consciously. Elizabeth loved her husband, who was a builder, and when she learned that he was cutting corners on some of his construction projects in order to keep costs down in ways that bordered on the unethical, she was distraught. She knew that times were bad in the building industry and that the competition was ferocious. Menu's World, how you doing? Competition was ferocious. But her preoccupation with her own work prevented her from realizing how worried her husband was about his business. When Elizabeth broached the subject with him, at first he was angry and defensive. But when she persevered, he saw that she was more concerned rather than hostile. He proceeded more and more to share with her his anxieties and the considerations that were prompting his corner cutting. Even so, they went through many difficult hours in the next week. At times, each lost control and resorted to shouting. But in the end, reason, love, and mutual respect won out. He committed himself to correcting his recent breaches on the job and to practicing integrity he had exhibited in the past. His wife reinforced his confidence that he would find a way to prevail. Having successfully weathered another storm, their marriage became stronger. If you really love someone, Elizabeth said, you don't let fear stop you from challenging him when that's what the situation calls for. Living unconsciously. Louise did not feel comfortable about her husband's new prospective partner when Paul brought him home for dinner. Paul owned several automotive service garages that were currently short of necessary capital, which this man was proposing to provide in exchange for a share of the business. None of the conversation at the dinner table made sense to Louise, and she did not attempt to bring it into clear focus. She told herself that business is a man's work, and she should not attempt to think about it. Nonetheless, it seemed to her, if only dimly, that the man was saying that while on paper he would now be the majority's owner. In fact, the business would remain Paul's. After all, the man said, what do I know about service garages? She noticed that Paul seemed restless, distracted, and vaguely irritable whenever she spoke. She told herself that a wife's foremost duty is to keep the home peaceful, so she remained dutifully silent. She tuned out the rest of the conversation. She said nothing when she saw Paul sign the agreement papers without checking with his lawyer, and she chose not to think about it. Either, just as she chose not to think when she saw one employee after another being discharged on the orders of the new partner, and less experienced ones are being hired without Paul's being consulted, just as she chose not to think or speak about it when she saw Paul's income shrinking for no reasons he could explain to her. Just as she chose not to think or speak about it when Paul came home one day and announced that he was filing for personal bankruptcy. It was as if each blow were a signal to close down her consciousness still further. But now she was crying a good deal. In fact, they both were. But they were not speaking or thinking about it. What's there to think about? Paul said one day in answer to her silence. I had some bad luck. It could happen to anybody. Louise looked at him across the breakfast table, desperately keeping her mind wrapped in a fog so that she would not start screaming. But she felt betrayed, not so much by her husband as by her parents, who long ago had promised her that if a woman is compliant and supportive and never challenge her husband, she'll be happy. But Louise wasn't happy. Why had life cheated her? She wondered bitterly. Perhaps Paul will do something, she told herself. It was not in her or Paul's view of existence that husbands and wives might think and talk together about the issues of their life. Can you find aspects of yourself in either of these women? If so, identify what they are. Are you proud or sad about what you identify? Living consciously. When Norman reached the age of 42, he knew he had achieved the major goals he had set for himself when he was happily married. I'm going to start that over. When Norman reached the age of 42, he knew he had achieved the major goals he had set for himself. He was happily married, he was a physician with a successful practice, and he had 3 children he loved and was proud of. But he was becoming increasingly aware of a vague dissatisfaction rising from deep within. Simu plays, how you doing? Aware of the vague dissatisfaction rising from deep within, as if some unknown part of his self was trying to get a signal through to his conscious mind. At first, he could not identify was a diffuse sense of longing. He did not brush it aside. He watched it. Gradually, he found himself remembering a long-forgotten dream of his youth, to write books. He reduced his work schedule and his social life to permit more time to explore these dreams and yearnings. He could not tell at first whether they represented a real desire or the residue of an adolescent fantasy, but he knew it was important to find out, because he knew that his life and what he made of it were important. He began to see that he passionately wanted to write fiction. Soon after, he was working on the outline of a novel. 2 years later, the novel was finished, and a year and a half after that, it was published. It did not only it did only moderately well. But by now, Norman knew beyond doubt that this was the work he wanted. His second novel was more successful, his third more successful still. He retired from medicine to write full time. Watching him, his wife saw Norman grow younger and happier. Watching him, his children learned an invaluable lesson. Honor your own wants, honor your own life. Always be alert to your inner signals, he said to them. Don't act impulsively, but pay attention. Sometimes one part of our mind is years ahead of another part in its wisdom. Living unconsciously. I really like that line. Sometimes one part of our mind is years ahead of another part in its wisdom. Living unconsciously. Tim was bored. A psychologist who had opened his practice at the age of 28, he was now 51, and he wondered how he could stand another 20 years of the same work. He had an individual and a group practice, and occasionally he conducted seminars for industry. He could no longer remember the point at which he had ceased working for pleasure and began working solely for money, but he knew that pleasure had ceased to be relevant long ago. Once he had offered his clients excitement, now he offered tired, cynical wisdom. He felt like a fraud and was continually astonished that no one else seemed to notice. It occurred to him, vaguely, that clients came to him with such problems. It occurred to him vaguely that clients came to him with just such problems as he was now experiencing, but that did not motivate him to think about his situation or to discuss it with anyone. His favorite recreation and escape was tennis, and often when a client was talking to him, he felt bored and dreamed of tennis. To his family, he seemed more and more lifeless, withdrawn, and irritable. Finally, he became enamored with a female client 30 years his junior and disappeared with her to an ashram in Colorado led by an Indian guru who taught free love and drug experimentation. Together with the absolute submission to the will of the guru as a path of spiritual enlightenment, the guru told him that thinking had been the cause of all of his troubles, and Tim liked to believe that this was true. Two different attitudes toward life, reason, and reality, which is closer to your own, and what do you observe to be the consequences for your self-esteem? In considering the preceding examples, observe the kind of issues involved in living consciously versus unconsciously. Lueni, hey you beef, cool book reading. Yeah, it's How to Raise Your Self-Esteem. Obviously, you can tell, it's right there on the stream. But yeah, I want to get more into audiobooks and voice acting and stuff like that, and I thought just reading on stream is kind of a way to do that, just a really low-key way to kind of interact with people, educate people, entertain myself, and educate myself all at the same time. So thanks for popping in. In considering the preceding examples, observe the kind of issues involved in living consciously versus unconsciously. Thinking, even when thinking is difficult, versus non-thinking. Awareness, even when awareness is challenging, versus unawareness. Thank you for the hydration. I do need that when I'm drinking or when I'm reading. Gotta moisten the throat. Thank you, Lueni. Clarity, whether or not it comes easily, versus obscurity or vagueness. Respect for reality, whether pleasant or painful, versus avoidance of reality. Respect for truth versus rejection of truth. Independence versus dependence. Active orientation versus passive orientation. Nice, gotta go, I'm gonna lurk a bit. Alright, thank you, Lueni. Willingness to take appropriate risks. Active orientation versus passive orientation. Willingness to take appropriate risks, even in the face of fear, versus unwillingness. Honesty with self versus dishonesty. Living in and being responsible to the present versus retreating into fantasy. Self-confrontation versus self-avoidance. Willingness to see and correct mistakes versus perseverance in error. Reason versus irrationalism. In the preceding stories, you will find all these themes present implicitly. One of the most important issues entailed in living consciously is intellectual independence. A person cannot think through the mind of another. We can learn from one another, but real knowledge implies understanding, not mere repetition or imitation. We can either exercise our own minds or pass on to others the responsibility of knowledge and evaluation and accept their verdicts more or less uncritically. Of course, we are sometimes influenced by others in ways we do not recognize, but this does not alter the fact that there is a distinction between the psychology of those who try to understand things for themselves and those who do not. What is crucial here is our intention, our goal. As a matter of general policy, do you aim to think for yourself? Is that your basic orientation? To speak of thinking independently is useful because the redundancy has value in terms of emphasis. Often what people call thinking is merely recycling all the opinions of others, not true thinking at all. Thinking independently about our work, our relationships, the values that will guide our lives is part of what is meant by living consciously. Independence is a self-esteem virtue. In considering the preceding vignettes, you may wish to ask, don't these people who live consciously already have good self-esteem? And don't the people who live unconsciously lack good self-esteem? How then can living consciously be the foundation of good self-esteem? We encounter here what I call the principle of reciprocal causation. By this I mean that behaviors that generate good self-esteem are also expressions of good self-esteem. Behaviors that are expressions of good self-esteem are also generators of good self-esteem. Living consciously is both a cause and an effect of self-confidence and self-respect. The more I live consciously, the more I trust my mind and respect my worth. The more I trust my mind and I respect my worth, the more natural it feels to live consciously. This same relationship exists among all behaviors that support self-esteem. Think about these stories. Can you isolate the areas in your life where you operate with the most consciousness? How about the areas in which you operate with the least consciousness? Using the material in this chapter for guidance, prepare 2 such lists in a notebook. This is an excellent way to deepen your understanding of what the issue of living consciously means to you. Let us say you identify 3 areas in which you recognize that your average level of consciousness is far less than it should be. Meditate on what seems to be difficult about staying in high-level mental focus in these areas. Lost my way to go. Meditate on what seems to be difficult about staying in high-level mental focus in these areas. Then for each of these areas, write the hard thing about staying fully conscious here is, and then, as rapidly as possible, without censoring yourself or thinking, write 6 to 10 endings. Then do the same thing for the good thing about not being fully conscious here is, then follow with, if I were to stay fully conscious here, you will probably make some illuminating discoveries. In doing the exercise, you will already be living more consciously. Finally, give some thought to tomorrow and the next 7 days of your life. Consider the question of how you can apply these ideas to your daily concerns. If, for example, you choose to be more conscious at work, what might you do differently? If you choose to be more conscious in one or more of your relationships, what would you change in your behavior? If you wish to grow in self-confidence and self-respect, begin now. Identify 3 new behaviors in the realms of work and relationships, respectively, that you can practice this week, and commit yourself to experimenting with them. And then go on to working in the next 7 days and the next to expand your consciousness further, one small step at a time. In the area of raising self-esteem, we evolve not by dreaming of giant steps, but by committing ourselves in action to little ones, moving step by relentless step to an ever-expanding field of vision. Not that extraordinary breakthroughs and transformations cannot occur. They can, but not to those who wait in empty passivity. we must act. We must begin from where we are. One small shift to higher consciousness opens the door to another and another. It does not matter at what point we start. It matters only that we take the responsibility of starting. Identify 3 areas in which you recognize that your average level of consciousness is far less than it should be. I wonder what that means. So, identify 3 areas. Meditate on what seems to be difficult about staying in high level mental focus in these areas. The hard thing about staying fully conscious here is blank. Okay, I think I can do that. So, this most recent thing was Amazon losing that job. So, if I were to think about meditate on what seems to be the difficult about staying in high level mental focus in each of these areas. High level mental focus in each of these areas. I just said Amazon, so I'll write that down. It was very hard for me to stay focused when I was at Amazon because just what's the prompt? The hard thing about staying fully conscious here is it's mindless. Like you're just doing the same thing over and over again. It's boring. It's not a stimulating activity. It's repetitive. It's hard to stay focused on what I want to do when I'm doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. Mindless, boring, repetitive, painful. Stressful, dangerous. And it's hard for me to stay fully conscious when I'm delivering packages for Amazon because it's hopeless. It doesn't matter how tired I am, there's always going to be more stuff to deliver. Meditate on the harder thing about staying fully conscious here. Then do the same for the good thing about not being fully conscious here. If I were to stay fully conscious here, well, I already kind of know. But I'd rather try that with the Renaissance Fair. Fair. It's hard for me to stay fully conscious there because it's overwhelming. It's stressful for another reason. Not just because it's overwhelming, but stressful, I guess, in the realm of just having to deal with people, communicate. It's hard to stay fully mindful because the weather, it could be hot, it could be cold, it could be raining, and it could be hot and raining, or it could be cold and raining. The cold rain is always the worst. Hot rain is bad because then it comes back with like that humidity, and it's really hot. But yeah, it's hard for me to stay fully conscious at the Renaissance Fair because I'm there to do a job. Like I'm there to teach people how to do something, how to not hurt themselves, but it's also hard for me to stay fully mindful at the Renaissance Fair because of attractive people. It's hard for me to stay fully mindful because of people interrupting me. Neurodivergence? What do I put there? Patrons' excitement. And it's hard for me to stay fully conscious because I'm constantly thinking about the fact that I work in a capitalistic system, that I'm working under somebody else. Dependent. Oh my god. I think we just had a breakthrough. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. What did they fucking say? What do they say on page 41 right here? They say independence is a self-esteem virtue. So, with that in mind, you're never gonna feel more confident in yourself if you're always depending on somebody, you know? Which I guess is where it really calls into question accessibility, you know? People who need a caretaker or people who can't fully live on their own by themselves. And it's not even about aptitude, it's not even about ability, it might even be about like finances, you know? Like, I could afford to go get my own apartment right now until my savings run out, and then I can't afford it anymore. So, like, I could feel this level of not having good self-esteem because I still live at home with my mom, but I have lived away from home. I have lived on my own for over a year. I've lived away from home with roommates for over a year. I spent 2 weeks in Taiwan, which wasn't just me being by myself, but like I had a host family and stuff. But point being is that I don't think I'm ever going to feel better about myself if I'm always working for somebody else. And that just might be the breakthrough I needed. Because it's hard, right? Where it's like, hey, go move that box. Yes, sir. You don't. Where does your self-esteem play a role into that? In that situation, it's more helpful to be mindful, because if I'm mindful of the fact that someone's telling me what to do, and I don't like that, who wants to be told what to do? On some level, it can be liberating because you don't have to think for yourself. Go kill that guy. Yes, sir. You know, like, you don't have to think about it, but then you would do that thing and then you would think about it. That's why the firing squad, they gave you blanks. Only one person had a real bullet, or one person only had a blank. Everyone else had bullets. And you would know if it was you or not that killed that person. So, the good thing about not being fully conscious here is, I guess I'm not depressing myself, you know? Because that was the problem when I would be fully conscious in either of the situations I'm working for somebody else. I want to be my own business owner. I want to have my own thing, and I don't have that. And I have this constant feeling of not feeling like I'm good enough, you know? I'm going to go now. Bye. It's nice been hearing this story. All right, Storm. See you later. So yeah, I think that's going to be it, though, for this. I don't know. We'll see how long chapter 4 is. It starts on page 45, and it goes until 71. It's a pretty beefy chapter. I think I might just finish. I might just read that. I'm not going to say later today, because then I'm going to hold myself accountable to that and feel bad if I don't do it. I could play something for a little bit. Just switch over, change gears, you know? Okay. The only question is what to play. I have no idea. Or I could take a break, you know? I'll take a pee real quick and see if that makes me feel any different. Any suggestions for play? Type them in the chat there. Mountain Blade? We can do some Mountain Blade. I haven't played, what haven't I played for a while? Um, um, I don't know. It's been a minute since I played. I haven't played any city builders in a while. I know that's probably not like the best content-wise, but I don't think I've ever played Banished on stream. I played Nomore on stream. I'm also streaming to YouTube right now too, so I don't think that's gonna cause any problems. But, we'll see. Mountain Blade is definitely an option though. I definitely probably at the top of the ladder right now. It's just I wanted to do a I don't know why I want to do a city builder. It's kind of like a what's the word? Nobody's redeeming stretch, but it's fine. Don't hit the fan. Don't hit the fan. Maybe because I just played Mountain Blade for like 6 hours, not yesterday, but the day prior. Wait, was that yesterday? Holy shit! Did I play? I think I did. Was it yesterday or the day before? Oh my god. Mind blur. I thought it was about to die. Maybe it's in my travel bag. Jesus. There it is. Sweetness of fruit, variety of salad. Ooh, fruit salad, you're the best of both worlds. Yeah. Yeah, I think Mountain Blade will be good. Um, I think that'll be just fine. And don't worry, I'll take the peace sign down. Hi, Stanley. Everybody. Guess who's joined us? Stanley. How you doing, buddy? He was just sleeping. Groggy. Groggy cat. Okay. Well, I should probably start pulling up the game before I get too carried away. Salad looks pretty good to me. Jeez, what am I doing? It's either I end the stream and then I pull it back up under a different category, or I don't know, man. Guess that's part of what it was talking about, though, isn't it? The idea that you got to be confident enough to make your own decisions. Not this outward approval, but I feel like that's what Twitch kind of is in a nutshell. Always looking for outward approval. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know. But I suppose the alternative is I don't have to keep streaming at all. I came on here to read, I read, and then that's that. Or at least get that video posted and uploaded and everything. Thinking. Are these my own thoughts, or am I just recycling the opinions of other people? I'm gonna go lift some weights. It's Looks like the peace sign's coming back up, you know? I'll think about it. Although that's part of my problem. But yeah, I'm gonna go lift some weights because I got this energy. Got to get the energy out. But yeah, yeah. And the headphones are still charging anyway. So. change of plans. I'm going to go take a shower because I need to take a shower. And I'm not going to keep neglecting my own health because I'm starting to think that might be why I just feel kind of like something's off, you know? Like, why do I just feel kind of right now? So I'm gonna go take a shower, and I'll end the stream here because it's getting long enough. If I'm gonna put this video on YouTube, and it's just supposed to be a reading a chapter out of a book, you know, I think that's gonna be more than enough. So that's gonna be it for me for now. I might be back later, probably. Don't want to promise anything and then take it away from you.